Hello, I am Jim Frecki, Executive Director of Atlanta Master Chorale. And on behalf of the Chorale, I welcome you to our Spirited Conversations Behind the Scores program. Today's program continues the spirit of our organization's mission to inspire and enrich the lives of our community. We are grateful for so many who continue to contribute and provide support for Atlanta Master Chorale and our virtual concert hall. Today's guest is an integral individual in the choral world. I'm anxious for the conversation to unfold. And so to open our program and introduce our guest, it's my pleasure to introduce Atlanta Master Chorale's Artistic Director, Eric Nelson.
Thank you, Jim, and hello, everyone. It is my great privilege and pleasure to welcome Professor Dr. Andrè Thomas as our guest for today's spirited conversation. Andrè Thomas is the recently retired professor and director of choral activities from Florida State. He's now professor of conducting at Yale and the director of the Yale Camerata. Professor Thomas is an educator, a conductor, a composer, clinician, pianist. He's the vice president of the National ACDA and chairman of the 2021 National Convention for ACDA. He's conducted choirs quite literally all around the world, as well as leading countless clinics and honor choirs in all states. He is one of our leaders of the profession and has been for many decades. And we welcome him today. Hello. Hello, how are you today?
I'm fine. Just wrapping up the year. Still more recitals to go to. Even virtually, and one more seminar to teach on Wednesday.
The finals and grade, maybe?
No finals,
okay.
Recitals, they're all in conducting. So the second years are giving full recitals, and the first years are doing works with, that are orchestrated. So I have students who are one is doing Chichester, another one's doing Fernhill Accordiano.
Love that.
Another one's doing the Bosio motets. And another one did lyrics for strings. So it's been an interesting time. We the recitals are like Rheinberg, Chariot Jubilee for one, and a number of orchestral pieces, because they have to do literally half orchestral and half,
And are they doing some in-person singing?
They are doing in person. We were very slow starting. In October, we could have 8 people outside, 12 feet apart in a mask. By the end of October, we were able to come inside with 8 people. And about a month ago, we were able to move up to 12 singers, but that's 12 singers and no instrumentalists. But so they're very conservative, and I understand it, and everybody's been safe, and and it's Yale, so if they're not going to be on the front page of the New York Times. So. Yeah.
Well, I want to talk a little bit more about life during COVID, but let's delay that for a little bit longer. Many people on this call know you well. They have maybe studied with you and sung under you, certainly sung your music and have been inspired by you in one place or another. But I don't know that many people know your background. And I'm always curious to know, how did you get from being a kid who had some kind of talent in music, right, to then deciding to do this in college and then becoming Andrè Thomas? So can you give us the version of how you got to be you?
Well, I don't think we necessarily choose music. I think music sort of chooses us.
I agree.
My mother did not want a musician. I was the baby, her only son. I had 2 older sisters, and she was determined that I wasn't going to be a musician. But she made the mistake of buying a toy piano. So I'm banging on it, and I went to church. This is 4 or 5 years old. And I was immediately fascinated by the two ladies that conducted the choir. They had these fancy robes that had gathered, and yeah, they had two different conductors. And I came home one day and I was banging on the piano, and my mother said, "That sounds like What a Friend." I said, "Yeah, it is, Mama. You want to hear What a Fellowship?" And I started banging around, and she said, "Oh no, you're not going to be a musician." And so she was determined. And then one day, about a year later, I hadn't, I had just turned 5. Um, a moving truck arrived and came up to the door, and they said, "We have a delivery for Andrè Thomas." And my mother said, "You have a delivery for Andrè Thomas? He's 5 years old." We said, "We know, but we have a delivery. May we deliver it?" And sure enough, some people from the church gave me my first piano.
Wow.
And that's kind of where it began.
Wow.
And so it was like, okay, I love this music, but, and she finally gave in, and I went to take my first piano lesson, which wasn't so successful. The first page was Music Land, if you know John Thompson, Book 1. And it's, in pentachord. And so she played it for me, and it's in C because you stay on the white keys. So she said, "It's your turn." So I took the piano and I played it back in B flat. And just that's where my hands landed, because that's my ear was working. And so she slapped my hands with the ruler, and I got up and I said, "You know what? My mama said all you folks are crazy anyway. I'm done." And I didn't really, one lesson, I thought I can look at the book, I can figure this out. And so lo and behold, it's now 7th grade, and I'm thinking, I probably need to have a really good teacher. So if you know Wichita, Kansas at all, I walked up the hill from my house, which wasn't that far, to Wichita State University. Went in and I saw these studios, how they make them. And there was one with a piano on it. So I said, that must be the piano teacher. So I knocked on her door, and it was Professor Frances Wallingford. And she was such a incredible woman. She came to the door. Her hair was like Einstein. She always combed it by putting her fingers through it, and just straight up and all white. And she said, "May I help you, young man?" I said, "Yes, ma'am. I need a piano teacher." And I said, "Do you teach piano?" And I must have offended her. She says, "I'm professor of piano." I said, "Okay, but that means you teach it, right?" And she said, "Yeah." "Well, I need a teacher." And she said, who have you studied with?" I said, "Well, I studied with John Thompson, and he has a book." And she laughed and she says, "Come on in. I'm going to teach you." And in 9 months, I entered the Federated Women's Club competition, playing the Brahms Ballade in D minor, and won it at 12 years old. And mainly because she was such a masterful teacher. She knew me. She knew what would best help me understand and make my mind up about the music. And so she told me the story of Edward. She says, "This is what Brahms is following here. It's the story about the legend of Edward." And she told me that legend, and I just played that story. And I kept saying, such mature interpretation. It wasn't mature. I was playing the story just like she said it was the story. And so that began life. And of course, like I said earlier, my life began in the church. And by the time I was 14, the minister fired the entire music staff, and I had the choirs.
Wow.
So I took over the choirs at age 14. And so that meant my mother was in the choir then, so I had to put her out of the choir.
You didn't.
I did. I put my mother out of the choir.
Oh, man.
It's, mothers are, one thing that happens is it's hard for a mother to sit there if somebody says something about their baby.
Yeah.
And I'm rehearsing the choir, and I was trying to get the bassist to do something. And this bassist, "I'm not going to do what that young punk has to do." And, I just kept going. I'm just happy-go-lucky, making this music. And rehearsal was over, and the choir was too large to be in the choir room. And so later on, I heard in the choir room this noise, and I opened up the door, and I looked, And there was that same bass, but this time he was off the ground by 2 inches. She had him by the left hand and she was going bam, 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 bam. And I'm going, Mama, put that man down. So she said until the time she died, my son put me out of the choirs. I can't be in the choirs anymore. But I said, this is just too hard on you. But that was my love. It came in the church.
Mm-hmm.
And to this day, I will always give Tabernacle Baptist Church, the start of my life with music.
Mm.
And particularly choral music, because that was the thing that immediately attracted me.
Mm-hmm.
And, I remember my mother, it was important that we had an education and a job. Those are two things that we were going to have no matter what. And I was 12, but I had to have a job. And so I was a shoe shine boy.
Mm.
Yeah. The incoming president of ACDA was a shoe shine boy. Yes, I was a shoe shine boy. And the kids would come by and make fun of you coming from school. Hey, shoe shine boy. And I said, that's okay. I'm making money. And I took my little check, not my check, my little amount of money,
Mm-hmm.
and went first to the record store. And they were having a sale on records, a big bin in the front. And it was
Mm-hmm.
99 cents
I missed
for
those
everything.
bins.
Yeah. So I dug in there and I found an album that stuck with me. And it was the Poulenc Gloria on one side and then the Poulenc Organ Concerto on the other
Mm-hmm.
side. And all of a sudden, I got this album for 99 cents. It was my first classical music album. And I fell in love with Poulenc.
Hmm.
And I think I'm still in love with Poulenc. It's one of, and I think it was just the harmonies that were in the Gloria that all of a sudden just rang so new for me.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I didn't play much Poulenc as a pianist, Debussy, Ravel were the two piano things, but Poulenc, I love the sound. And that's probably why I've conducted that piece probably 12 times, 12 or 13 times. I don't know. But yeah, I do love it. And so that's kind of how I began. That's who I was. And um, life doesn't always turn out to be as fair as one might think it would be. But I grew up knowing that God has a purpose. And when God has a purpose, that purpose is going to happen.
Mm.
And sometimes when people think things intend evil, God can shift all those things around for one's good. Um, I've always believed that. I believed it when I found out that I'd have to replan a national convention to a virtual conference. I figured God's going to figure He's going to help me. He intends, for us to be able to keep singing. There are too many people who depend on that lifeblood. So get busy and stop whining. And that's kind of been my life.
So I have a theory. Well, it's not. I was going to say I have a theory. I have an observation. It's not just mine, certainly, but you're another example of it. That artists who came out of the church, whose musical formation was in the church, whether they're choral artists or opera singers or commercial singers on the radio, that the ones that seem to touch people with their singing often tell stories that that's where they came from, that they understand that music is more than applause and entertainment, more than commerce, that music at its heart can affect people and in very profound ways. So do you think you've always carried that with you, even though you were 14 when you started?
Yeah, it was a matter of survival. But it was a Baptist church, and and I think I knew immediately the effect of music because every time I went to a worship service, even when I was younger, um, Black worship is expressive. It tends not to be introverted. So immediately you can hear or understand how people are being moved or being touched by that music making process,
Yeah.
you know? And so, and I think, Eric, I, I, I think people can sense that, and I think um, being able to sense that and being willing to give that,
Hmm.
um, or to step aside so it can happen. Sometimes you got to get out of the way. Um, I think that those things are true, and you want a sense of it coming from some place. We want the discipline of music, but we want the heart of music. Music that is only discipline. I don't know, what does the Bible say? A tinkling cymbal, or what's that scripture?
Yeah, a clanging cymbal, clanging cymbal, I think.
Yeah, or, yeah.
Gong or
That's,
clanging cymbal.
yeah, it becomes noise,
Yeah.
no matter how beautiful. But when it takes on that spirituality, you know, then it takes on a different life.
Well, and then don't you think the craft, which we work so hard to communicate and teach and build the skill set of our singers so that they can do what the composer asks of us,
Mhm.
that all of that is in service of this other thing, which is harder to pin down. But I mean, I've certainly talked with lots of people over the years who've sung under you, maybe at a Allstate or something, and they'll say that that moment or that weekend, those couple of days, changed their life. And I think that there's a sense to which that didn't happen by accident, but the impact of the music upon the audience and upon the singers is important to you.
Yes, it is. But, also, I would say to you, Eric, for me, music has simply been my tool. That's it. I love people.
Hmm.
Okay. I love people. And because I love people so much, God's given me music. And I think that is why I had pretty good skills as a pianist. Um, and all the way up to being offered contracts with major orchestras to play, and deciding that there's something I miss. The look on my junior high school kid's face at that Christmas concert, that that was missing in my life, and I didn't want to make music just that way. Some people are geared to do that way, and that's fine, but I wasn't. I had a job to do, and my job was to reach people. And my tool to do that was music. And for some reason, and I think teaching is the same way. I feel the same way about teaching. You teach people. You don't just teach subject matter. And if people can sense that, the subject matter will come. If they know that you're interested in them, in making that process happen. And I often say that Yehudi Menuhin said, all learning is but a bridge from the unknown to the known. And if you want to teach somebody something, you got to go where they are. And then you can take them on that journey. But you can't say, here's where I am and good luck. You're not sophisticated enough. No. If it means going back to back in the day, the Jackson 5, to get that to make that connection and making that music, that can easily lead to Lowell Mason and the Cannons, and all of a sudden they're singing in with harmony, and Jeremiah Ingalls, I remember looking at those ninth grade boys and say, you know, I had played them some Bach,
Hmm.
you know, and of course I went out and, you know, teachers, God bless teachers. They never get enough money. They never get enough supplies. So you use your own money. And I had gone out and bought these speakers. This is back in the day, you know, maybe even before your day. They showed frequencies of sound with colors, you know.
Hmm.
I went and bought these speakers, wired up my room just for those boys that I could not reach. And they heard Bach on those speakers. And they said, it's green over there, it's red over there, it's green over there again. What is that called? I said, it's called fugue. And I said, they went, wow, fugue is freaky, is what they said to me. Fugue is really freaky. So the next day I said, we're going to sing a fugue. We don't sing, but you're in choir. Oh, we don't sing. So I got one kid, I said, Newt, can you help me out? And bless his heart, he had a speech impediment. And if I had known better then, I didn't know better then. The Jeremiah Ingalls is full of frickedness when you have a speech impediment. But anyway, it begins, fly swift among the hands of time. And they started to sing it. They started to sing it. And from them, it went from Jackson 5 to the speakers of Bach to singing a fugue. And that's the transition. And you look at people and you say, you have no limits. Right. You have no limits. You know, any limitation you have is my limitation. And I need to work on that. You know?
Let us interrupt this conversation for just a moment and have everyone see an example of you conducting. And I think this is an example of you leading a large gathering of people, obviously pre-COVID. So let's give this a listen. We'll talk about it on the other side.
All right.
Do you remember what the occasion for that was? I gotta tell you, it's just seeing all those people is just like another
Well,
age ago, isn't it?
yeah, it's amazing to think about that. The occasion was Ruby Diamond, which is the old auditorium concert hall that we had, um, was completely stripped and completely redesigned to
Mm,
that beautiful concert hall you see now that is acoustically beautiful. And that was the opening night. The
mm,
orchestra went first, then the bands, and then finally it was the choirs.
nice.
And I knew, and we each did a commission piece. That wasn't the commission piece. The commission piece for us was Ola Yale.
Mm,
Um, but I decided if the choirs are going to make their appearance, especially after the bands had done all of that and they'd heard all of that sound,
yeah.
um, then they will see what it's like with 600 plus voices singing a piece by Jeffrey Ames. Jeffrey Ames is a former student. And I
Mm,
thought that would be great.
great.
Besides, it's glory to God in the highest. Let's go. And that was the opening of Ruby Diamond.
Nice. I have so many questions I'd like to ask you, but as this is a conversation hosted by Atlanta Master Chorale, I think I'll ask you this one next. Since, according to your bio, since 1988, you served as the director of the community choir in Tallahassee.
Uh-huh.
And over the last, I don't know, 10, 15 years or so, there's just been this fabulous new, I'll call it a new thing, where professional choirs have grown up all around the United
Mm-hmm.
States. And it's fantastic. And these they find the funding and gather these tremendously skilled musicians together for a purpose. Everyone flies in, they rehearse for a day or two, they perform, and then they all fly home. And I think it's amazing. Yet, I also find that there is a value in community choirs, as Atlanta Master Chorale is, where we live and work and have our being in this place, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the choir has professional musicians in it, but then lots of folks who have day jobs outside of music, and singing in the choir is their musical outlet. It's a way to feed their soul and to keep sharp those skills that they honed along the way as musicians from the various tremendous teachers and choral music experiences they've had heretofore. So I've always found it to be one of the things about you that I find inspiring, and I thought I'd give you a second to talk about it, that you could have very easily formed the Andrè Thomas Singers, right? And you were probably approached to do it, and maybe you thought about it, but the idea that you would have kept in your life on an ongoing basis a community choir is amazing to me and fantastic to me. So can you talk a little bit about why you did that and why, hopefully, you still find that to be a valuable thing in America?
Well, I think when Dean Glidden approached me with the idea of taking this group on, and they were about 25 or so singers in it. And so I had agreed. And then that fall when we began, they were lined around the block.
Mm.
And the group grew from 25 to a solid group of 300. It came every Monday night.
Mm-mm-mm.
And, you know, I found for me, I think there were two things. I wanted my students, my graduate students, to see me working in an environment that wasn't all auditioned.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
That, you know, their life, you know, granted, that's great. And if you can make your life that way, that's great. But you need to be able to work with everyday people. You need to be able to work with, you know, Joe Bob, who all of a sudden, you know, had listened to Willie Nelson all of his life and thought, okay, I might try this singing thing. And he might just show up for your choir. And I used to say, I used to say to them that they had to walk through the door. And then I had to change that to they had to get through the door, because I had people in wheelchairs. I had people who said it didn't matter. It really didn't matter. They were, I can't say how much I love that group of people. And I've, watching them as, and seeing them and 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 knowing that I would lose some of them, because they were aging. But then we had young ones coming in too. And so it was always that sort of perpetualness of life that I so loved. And that board organized and got really acquainted with Course America. And, we had surveys, we were really at the forefront of community courses, because they wanted to do that and they wanted to achieve. In the early years, I had to decide how many of them could sing when Robert Shaw would come, because Robert Shaw would come every year for 10 years. And it was my job to prepare the choir, you know. And I will never forget little Margaret. She was about 80 something. And she says, I just want to sing with Mr. Shaw. I just want to sing with him. Before I die, I just want to sing. Margaret, you will sing with him. Just watch me, because she had a little flutter like, Linda the Good Witch. And that was Margaret. And I said, now, Margaret, I'll stand off to the side. Now, when you see my hand go like that, you need to make sure that's nice and clean. And she watched my hand, and she got to sing with Mr. Shaw that whole time. And you cannot take those experiences away. And for my graduate students, those that have come and gone, they became the parents. I mean, literally, that choir is as good at keeping up with every graduate student I've ever had as I am. I mean, they are there, they're commenting about their children. It created a family. And I wanted that family because we needed to step outside into the community. We didn't, choirs didn't really have their audiences, And by the time I founded that choir, a year later, we never sang in a concert without a full house, because people were there, of support. And I also wanted to do major works, not every once in a while when the orchestra man could give me the choir. I wanted major works going every semester, and sometimes 2 major works in a semester, so that we would grasp that literature. And they thrived on it. They thrived on it. And so my final to them was to dedicate the mass that I wrote. And that's dedicated to that community chorus. And they premiered it in Kansas City in 2019. That was sort of the farewell. But I will always love that choir. And those people, I remember we were singing at Carnegie Hall, and that was the first big trip. And we were singing the Lord Nelson. And I'm trying to have the rehearsal in the hotel. And all of a sudden, I see the paramedics run in. And I've got an alto over there like this, and that was Florence, and like most altos, she had an opinion. Always. My alto section, every choir has an opinion. But it was Florence, and they got her all settled and everything. And I thought, okay, she's going to be resting because, So I went downstairs to see them off. They were going to the show. And I looked, and there was Florence in her tam. And she was all dressed and ready to go. And she said, I'm not missing any moment of this trip, And Monday nights that's my church. That's where I get churches, when I come on Monday nights, and I'm not going to miss anything while we're in New York at Carnegie Hall. I thought, yes, ma'am. All of those wonderful characters of people that had so enriched my life.
Nice. We're getting a couple of questions coming in, and I want to ask one of them of you from Meg Gercheff. And Meg asks, who are the living composers, or composers, conductors, and choirs, who inspire you the most right now?
Oh, there's so many new young composers that I go, wow, that's wonderful. We just did our spring concert Friday night, and I included the name of the concert was "Let Your Voice Be Heard," and
Mm,
so it started with the voice of a woman, all the way back to Castellana,
mm.
to Joseph named LGBTQ and social justice. And one of the pieces I did was Cage Bird Sings for Freedom. It's by a young man by the name of Joel Thompson.
Yes.
Many people know his work from The Seven Unarmed Men. Joel is also a doctoral student at Yale. And so I
He
wanted
did
to
his
do,
master's with me, by the way.
oh, that's right. That's right.
By the way,
By the way, well, I think he's a fabulous young man,
he
and
is.
I love his voice. I love you know they asked me the other day at colloquium what pieces I could have, 5 pieces I would take with me, and if I was stuck on a desert island, and I hate those questions because you know whether or not I take the music or not, the music is still going to be in my head. So I said, well, Messiah, there's no way, Messiah would have to go. Then I thought, well, it might be Bach B minor, you know, and it might be, I said, but, I'm going to leave that blank because I haven't died yet. And, and there are some young people coming along that I go, they have something to say. And I think Joel is one of those people, you know. So
Absolutely.
thanks for your work with him, my friend. I think he has something to say.
He does.
Um, I also have some former students that I think they also have something to say, including Marcus Garrett, his Invitation to Love, um, you know, Jeff Fames. Uh, I'll be forever looking at that music. Recently, Jennifer Higdon, I
Mhm.
think she's writing some really there's a setting of Invitation to Love
Mm.
of hers that is just uncannily beautiful. Um, that those things happen. So I don't know. I would say they intrigue me. Um, Being at a certain age, it's easy to look at young conductors and say, wow, congratulations to you. I know your life's going to be fulfilling because you have something special to give. Um, and, a number of them are former students who played or sang, like David Childs or uh, Christopher Harris is a young voice that has some really beautiful music, um, and is making beautiful music. He took his choir to NCCO, the last one before the shutdown. Um, I look at Jason Max Ferdinand and what he's doing, and I go, bravo to you. He talked about the creation of the Jason Max Ferdinand Singers. And I said, well, remember what the success is of the Aeolians and remember how they're based. Now, you've got to figure out that's going to be a little different with this professional choir, you know. But as I watch the professional choir, 3/4 of them are past Aeolian, so it's the same thing. It's the it's the same commitment to the music and to the spirituality of the music. And
So let me ask you this overarching question. I hope the question's not so broad that it's not answerable, but um, you've been involved in the profession first as a young student coming up, and then almost immediately as a leader in the field. And I'm just curious, as you look back, as you take stock of where we are now, and you look
mhm.
back over where we've been, how has the field itself, how has the profession changed? And what part of those changes just make your heart dance? And Is there anything from the past that you think maybe we've let go of that wasn't a good thing? How have we changed?
Well, I think there are two things. I'm asked this constantly because we're in a situation now where we're thinking about diversity, equity, and inclusion. Those things are foremost in our mind,
Mm-hmm.
and so we have to say, okay, what does that mean for us? Does it mean um, a replacement of the canon? And my answer to that is not at all. The thing is inclusion, and when people talk about people of color or marginalized groups, they have been with us all through classical music. From 1600 forward, there were people of color writing music, you know, but we don't know that music. You know, we should know the music of Nunez Garcia, who's Afro-Brazilian.
Mm.
Um, you know, there's so many other pieces of music that need exploring, um, and need to be included. Music. Like I said, one of the students at Yale just did Chariot Jubilee of Nathaniel Dent,
Mhm.
a great piece of music. Um, but I just talked about a performance with Billy Taylor of Peaceful Warrior, which was written for the Atlanta Symphony.
Mm.
Fabulous piece. But people don't know that. And what this has done for us is sent us digging. It sent us digging as we should dig. Okay, and we're going to find some great pieces of music, whether it's Leonardo or it's De La Cruz, we're going to find some great pieces of music, and we're going to find some music that's just okay. It's like looking at the Salzburg composers. After a while, you go, okay, that's fine. Haydn's still a pretty good composer, even though Albertsberger is okay. You know, um, but yeah, I think we will find it. So that's the new. That's the new, and I think we need to embrace that. Um, the old is don't throw it away.
Mm.
Don't throw away the canon, because the canon will teach us a lot. Okay, and as I talk to the younger region presidents about the past, don't throw the past away. Learn from the past. I look at the founding members of ACDA. I look at my own teacher, who was Harold Decker. Okay. I learned how to run a graduate program because of Harold Decker. I mean, just seeing Harold Decker. I'd never heard of ACDA, 1978, he says, you're going to ACDA and you're going to sit next to me the entire conference, because I want you to see how things work, And I remember sitting there next to him and as Luther sang. And then I will never forget when Robert Fountain came out with University of Wisconsin-Madison. And he was all sort of drawn over, and he finally took the podium and he started Der Geisthilfe.
Mm.
And I have never heard a performance of Der
Mm.
Geisthilfe that so moved me as what Bob Fountain did on
It would
that
have been
stage.
a cappella in those years, probably, right?
Yeah.
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 Mm.
But oh, whoa, it was, and his body transformed.
Mm.
I thought, oh, is this a healing? I mean, what's going? Bob can do that to somebody. I don't know. But yeah, I will. And we can't forget the Bob Fountains, and we cannot forget the Harold Deckers. We can't. My other teacher was Margaret Hillis. We can't forget. And the struggle that Margaret and Fiora Cantino and all those women went through to exist. You know, Now women aren't going through that, but they were the struggle. You know, and so I think the past is very important because it sets us to look in the future. And the other thing is, as I had to say to myself, you thought you had stopped, but this pandemic told me that I'm going to have to learn more stuff, like how to keep my computer on, how to check for my speed, how to, all these things that I thought, griping about growing. And then I sit there and I think, well, thank you, Lord. You just reminded me that I'm not dead yet and I have to learn some more stuff. And so just keep learning. And so that's kind of how I feel about the past, and that's kind of how I feel about the present.
Nice. The thing I would add to that is the accessibility to performances and repertoire, that we're just a couple of clicks away on Google. I mean, I remember in college that my professor in college, who was Donald Bailey, had that LP of the Eric Erickson Swedish radio choir. He would play for that one day, and just our eyes got big as saucers. We'd never heard repertoire like that. We'd never heard singing like that. We thought we were pretty good, but oh my goodness. And if you didn't happen to know that recording or know someone with it, you couldn't know about it. And when we were picking repertoire, it was, someone would a friend of yours would have to hand you a copy of a piece of music. And, the kind of reading sessions at clinics were huge, because that was your one chance to find new repertoire, other than just a list of titles, which didn't tell you anything. And now, my goodness, we can hear some of the best performances all over the world of all the repertoire there is, and new repertoire and all. So I find that all of that aspect also has just made us closer together as a repertoire, right? As a profession, as a
community. Absolutely. And there's so much music, we'll never perform it all. It would be nice to think we would perform it all. And I remember, talking to Mr. Shaw, and he was talking about that first tour. He did 25 performances of the Mozart Requiem in that first tour with the chorale. Well, most of us are not going to get those opportunities. We're not going to get 25 requiems. We're not going to get all of that, but we're going to get a lot of other stuff, And I remember talking to him about the bottings. He hadn't heard the bottings, those 3 botting pieces. I think that might be good, So he ended up recording them with the festival singers. But I think we'll continue to learn. We'll continue to grow. I remember, performing the Leslie Bassett Collett for Peace. Do you know that? For prepared, tape, and choir. And it's all the Sputnik sounds, and the choir has a pitch, these pitches. I kept thinking, I don't know if I can stretch that much, but yeah, I could. Or Thea Musgrave's Rorate Cheli. Can I stretch that much? Yeah, I can, And there's some pieces you stretch for and you say, I will never see you again, For me, it's Les Noces. But once for Les Noces of Stravinsky is enough for me. Yeah. Symphony of Psalms, that'll come back more. But Les Noces, I'm done. And I'm almost done. I'm pretty done with Friedhof Erden too. It would just depend on what choir, maybe if I'm back with Room from Core or something, I might consider it, but nah.
I think we've been very fortunate to live in a time when there are so many great young composers writing so much beautiful music, much of which will stay, I think, in the repertoire. Professor Thomas, it has been a great joy to spend this time with you. Thank you for your time, for your openness, for your transparency, for your incredible leadership as an educator and as a conductor. As an administrator, I think you've taught half of the teachers in the Southeast.
Feels like it at times.
Thank you very, very much for this.
You're welcome, and thank you for the work you do at Emory and with the Master Chorale. I think every time you perform, I think I've managed to find my way back there just to tell you what a wonderful job you and your ensembles do.
Thank you, Andre. Jim, over to you.
Thank you. You answered probably most questions as we were going, and there's 1 or 2 that have popped up, and I want to give them an opportunity, if you don't mind. What would you say to hundreds of thousands of non-professional singers out there who may be reconsidering joining choir membership after a year of not singing?
Oh, I think we're all going to have to recruit a bit after this year of not singing. I think all the ensembles have maybe shrunk a little bit. I found with the Camerata, I think normally used to sing with about 60 people. We sang with about 90 to 104 or so singers. People miss it. And I would say, come just try it, and experience it. I think we will have enough of our people left that they will be around helping in that recruitment, I think it's access. I think that about diversity and membership. There is more diversity when it is accessible for people. There's more membership when it's accessible. We had people say, well, I don't know if I can join the Tallahassee Community. Of course, you guys just did the Missa Solemnis of Beethoven, another one that I don't want to do again. But I don't know. You just come on. We'll make it work for you. Now you sign a student to stand next to them and guide and point and come in a little bit early and help them negotiate some things, and they're there. And some of those people stay for a lifetime. So I would say, yeah, that's what I would say. Give it a try. And we're open. And we're standing there with our arms open, just waiting for you.
So true. So true. Thank you, André, for joining us today. Thank you, Eric, for leading this conversation. To quote one of the comments from Matthew Irish, this has been fantastic. And I know the whole choral world, André, is grateful to Tabernacle Life Church for launching you into what we now can enjoy as a life that has touched not only musicians, but has touched countless people in listening and enjoying music. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. I appreciate that, Jim. Thank you.
Okay, we are going to move into just the last reminder. Join us, if you will, on Monday, June 21st at 12 p.m. for our next live broadcast of Spirited Conversations Behind the Scores. I want you to eavesdrop on Atlanta Master Chorale's Artistic Director, Eric Nelson, once again, as he talks with Mark Lawson, president of ECS Publishing Group. They're going to discuss the intricacies of choral music composing and publishing. The conversation will include Lawson's insights on what publishers look for when deciding whether to publish a piece of music, as well as advice for some young composers. Complete details on that next program and all of the upcoming Spirited Conversations are available on atlantamasterchorale.org/virtual. And this recording of this conversation will be available on our YouTube channel within the next few days. Thank you so much for joining us today and have a wonderful day.